The first thing I became aware of was the sound. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. A heart monitor. Steady and rhythmic. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids wouldn't respond. I tried to move my hands, but they felt impossibly heavy, as though they were weighed down by something I couldn't see or understand. The second thing I became aware of was the smell. Antiseptic. Harsh and chemical. Beneath it, something else, expensive perfume. The kind Aurora always wore. Aurora Sinclair, my financial advisor. My trusted colleague. My husband's lover. The third thing was the voice. My husband's voice. Is she completely sedated? Victor asked. His tone was clinical, detached, not the warm, loving voice I had known for 15 years. This was someone else entirely, someone I had never actually known at all. Deep sedation, according to the doctor, a female voice replied. Aurora, the drug interaction put her into a protective coma. They say it could be days before she wakes up. If she wakes up. Victor leaned close to my hospital bed. I could feel his breath near my ear. I could hear the rustle of his expensive suit. And then he whispered, words that sent ice through my paralyzed body. It's perfect, he said softly. She looks almost gone. The life insurance payout is the only thing keeping us from ruin. Once she's pronounced dead, we can buy the peer development land by the end of the month. 50 million in profit, Aurora. Do you understand what that means? Aurora laughed, a cruel, calculating sound. Just make sure the doctor doesn't ask too many questions about the medication swap. Cardiac arrhythmia, right? Natural causes. Already handled, Victor said. I've been managing her medications for 6 months. The dosage adjustments were so subtle that nobody would ever notice. When she goes into septic shock tomorrow, it'll look like a hospital-acquired infection. Happens all the time in ICUs. My heart began to race. I could feel it pounding in my chest, and distantly I understood what was happening. The monitor was registering my fear, my elevated heart rate, my body's panic response to the horror I was hearing. I was conscious, completely, terrifyingly conscious, and I was listening to my own husband plan my murder. I am Juliet Sterling, 38 years old, the founder and CEO of Sterling Acquisitions, a real estate development company that I had built from nothing over 15 years. I had worked 60-hour weeks, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and established a reputation as the most aggressive, intelligent investor in the Pacific Northwest. Then I made a catastrophic mistake. I fell in love with Victor. He was charming, handsome in that effortless way that made people trust him immediately. He was a venture capitalist with family connections, or so I thought. He had swept into my life 3 years ago at a charity gala, and within 6 months he had moved into my penthouse apartment. Within a year we were married. I had changed my will to make him my executor and beneficiary. I had added him to my accounts. I had done everything a foolish woman does when she believes she has found her forever person. What I didn't realize was that Victor was systematically dismantling my life. He had convinced me to fire my longtime corporate attorney, Mr. Finch, arguing that his fees were excessive. I have excellent connections, Victor had insisted. Aurora can handle everything through her firm. She's brilliant, and she'll save you hundreds of thousands in legal fees. What I didn't know was that Victor and Aurora were lovers, that they had been planning this from the beginning. He had convinced me to let him manage my personal medications, calling it sweet care, and part of being a devoted husband. He had gradually isolated me from my friends, always finding reasons why I shouldn't go out. You're looking stressed, darling. Why don't you rest? You're too much in your own head lately. The isolation had been perfect. By the time of my collapse, nobody close to me even knew where I was or what was happening. My parents lived abroad. My business associates were distant. I had been systematically cut off from everyone who might have noticed that something was wrong. And Victor had timed it perfectly. Sterling Acquisitions had just secured a massive development opportunity, a prime waterfront property called Pier Landing. The rezoning for commercial development had just been approved. The land was worth $100 million, which meant, after purchase and development costs, a $50 million profit for whoever controlled the deal. Victor didn't care about sterling acquisitions. He wanted that $50 million, and he needed me dead to get it. The life insurance policy I had taken out 10 years ago, a $15 million policy to protect my business, had Victor listed as the primary beneficiary. He had insisted on it when we got married. "It's responsible," he had said. "If something happens to you, I want to make sure I can take care of everything." That $15 million was supposed to be enough to trigger the sale of the pier development rights, which would then generate the $50 million in development profits for whoever owned the rights after my death. Victor had calculated it perfectly, and I had just spent the last 72 hours lying in a hospital bed, completely paralyzed by whatever combination of drugs he had put in my system, listening to him and Aurora celebrate my murder. I needed to understand what was happening to my body. From my research background, I had studied business law and forensic accounting. I understood that what I was experiencing was likely drug-induced paralysis. The combination of medications Victor had been giving me, enhanced by something else he had administered in the hospital, had probably caused a neuromuscular blockade. My brain was completely functional. I could hear. I could think. I could feel, barely, the sensation of the hospital sheets against my skin, and a deep, aching pain in my temples that suggested I was being sedated regularly. But my voluntary motor control was completely shut down. I couldn't move my eyes. I couldn't move my mouth. I couldn't move my limbs. I was essentially locked inside my own body, aware and conscious, but completely unable to communicate. I was a prisoner in my own flesh. My first strategic realization came when I noticed something about the heart monitor, the beeping pattern. My actual heartbeat was sometimes slightly ahead of the monitor's registered beep. There was a delay in the system, a small lag between my physical heart activity and the digital registration. This meant something crucial. I could test the system. If I controlled my breathing and my emotional state, I could see how the monitor responded. And more importantly, I could create patterns in the beeping that might serve as a communication method. I focused every fiber of my consciousness on breathing. In through my nose, if I could still move my diaphragm. Out. Slow. Controlled. I was trying to regulate my anxiety, trying to think like the forensic accountant I was instead of a terrified woman. I could survive this. I just needed to gather information. Over the next 48 hours, Victor and Aurora visited regularly. They talked freely, believing I was either comatose or dying. They made no effort to hide their plans. "The rezoning documents are already filed," Aurora said during one visit, spreading papers across my bedside table. "The pier development site. Victor, once we get the life insurance payout, we can close on the land within 2 weeks. The pre-construction arrangements are already in place." I strained to see the documents. The words visible to me were limited. "Pier landing development, commercial zoning approval, phase 2 construction, $100 million land acquisition." "And nobody will suspect anything?" Victor asked. "Nobody," Aurora replied. "The hospital will certify natural causes. The insurance company will pay. And in 6 months, we'll be $30 million richer from the pier development profits alone. That doesn't even count the other properties you can acquire once you have this cash flow." Other properties. He was planning to use my death as a financial springboard for a real estate empire. I made a mental note. The development site was called Pier Landing. I would need to remember that. The nurse who changed everything arrived on the 3rd night of my hospitalization. Her name was Tanya Rodriguez. She was somewhere in her late 30s, with kind eyes and an efficiency that suggested she had been nursing in intensive care for a long time. She worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, which meant she saw me when Victor and Aurora were gone, when the hospital was quiet, when there were fewer witnesses. Tanya spoke to me as she worked, even though she believed I was unconscious. Most nurses did. There were studies showing that comatose patients could sometimes hear and respond to familiar voices, even if they couldn't move or communicate. "It's okay, honey," Tanya said as she adjusted my fore. "You're safe. I'm going to take good care of you." Safe. The word was so cruel, so wrong. "I know something's not right about your case," Tanya continued, checking my vitals. "The medication combination, the sudden collapse, the husband who's here constantly but never looks worried. I've seen a lot of things in my 15 years of nursing, and I've learned to trust my gut." Tanya's gut was telling her something was wrong, and then she did something that changed everything. She leaned down close to my ear and whispered, "If you can hear me, and if you're in there somewhere, I want you to know that I believe something bad has happened to you. I'm going to find out what it is, and I'm going to help you." I felt tears form in my eyes. I couldn't cry openly. My face was a paralyzed mask, but I could feel the moisture gathering beneath my eyelids. Someone knew. Someone believed me, even though I was completely unable to communicate. Over the next 3 days, Tanya became my lifeline to the outside world. She was careful. She never showed any outward sign that she suspected anything was wrong. But each time she was alone with me, she would perform small tests. "Juliet," she said during one shift, "I'm going to touch your right hand. I want you to focus all your energy on your pinky finger. Just your pinky. Don't worry about anything else. Just the smallest, tiniest movement of your pinky. Can you try that for me?" I had no idea if I could move my pinky, but I tried. God, I tried. I focused every ounce of mental energy on that single digit. I imagined firing the neural pathways. I imagined the electrical impulse traveling from my brain, down my spinal cord, through my arm, to my pinky finger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, so slight that it might have been a tremor or an involuntary muscle spasm, my pinky moved. It was the smallest, most insignificant movement, a fraction of an inch. But it was movement. Tanya's eyes widened. She didn't say anything. She simply documented my vital signs in the chart, made a note about minor involuntary muscle response, and continued her work. But when she returned an hour later, she brought something with her, a small digital tablet. She placed it under the edge of my mattress, hidden from view, with the battery at 20% charge. "This is a secure messaging device," she whispered. "Tomorrow night, during my break, I'm going to help you access it. I think you're conscious, Juliet, and I think we're going to find a way to get you out of this." The next evening, during the hospital's shift change when surveillance was minimal and nursing staff was transitioning, Tanya executed her plan. She positioned herself between me and the door, blocking the view of my bed from the hallway. She placed her hand on my shoulder and spoke quietly. "I'm going to adjust your position. I need you to work with me as much as you can. I'm going to prop you slightly forward. I know it might hurt. I know you're terrified, but we need to do this." With extraordinary gentleness, Tanya adjusted my hospital bed. She elevated the head section slowly and positioned several pillows behind me. The movement was agonizing. Every muscle screamed with the effort of being repositioned, but I was slightly more upright than before. Then Tanya placed the tablet directly in front of me, at an angle where I could see the screen if I moved my eyes. "The tablet is set to eye-tracking technology," she whispered. "It's designed for patients with paralysis. You look where you want to tap. The tablet will register your eye movements and activate the screen. But Juliet, you have to be careful. If Victor or Aurora sees this, it's over. Do you understand?" I strained my eyes downward, looking at the tablet in affirmation. "Good," Tanya said. "I've already accessed a secure email account. It's set up to communicate with my personal phone. Nobody will trace it back here. I'm putting my burner phone number in the contacts. If you need me, you send a message. I'll get it immediately." She placed the tablet under the sheet, positioned it so that only I could see it, and backed away. "I'm going on my break," she said in her normal voice. "Your vitals look good. I'll be back in 30 minutes. The first thing I did with the tablet was research. I used eye tracking to navigate to a browser. My eyes were so weak from the paralysis that controlling the movement was agonizing, but I focused through the pain. I searched for everything I could find about Victor Morrison. His real background, his family connections, his financial history. What I discovered was worse than I imagined. Victor Morrison had no legitimate business background. He had 2 prior marriages, both ending in situations where he had inherited significant sums. The first wife had died in a car accident. The second wife had overdosed on prescription medication. Both deaths had been ruled accidental. Both wives had insurance policies in his name. Both life insurance payouts, totaling $8 million, had disappeared into real estate ventures that had mysteriously collapsed, leaving no financial records. Victor wasn't a venture capitalist. He was a serial predator, and I was going to be his third victim. My second search was for information about the medications in my system. I looked up the drug cocktail that Victor had been administering, a combination of sedatives and neuromuscular blocking agents that were typically used in anesthesia. The specific combination he had created was designed to be undetectable in standard blood work, especially if someone ordered the tests with specific instructions not to look for paralytic agents. Someone had ordered exactly those tests for me. I searched for the doctor's name on my admission forms, visible in the tablet's access to my medical records, and found his connection to a small private medical practice that Victor had started funding 3 months ago. Everything was connected. Everything was planned. And then I searched for information about Aurora Sinclair. Aurora had been a licensed financial advisor for 12 years, but there was no record of her maintaining those licenses. No record of her actually managing any accounts. In fact, her entire professional history appeared to have been fabricated. She wasn't a financial advisor. She was Victor's accomplice, possibly his lover, but definitely his partner in crime. The 2 of them had created an elaborate scheme. Identify a wealthy, isolated woman, marry her, gain access to her financial accounts, and then systematically poison her to death, making it look like a natural medical event. And I, brilliant Juliet Sterling, successful real estate mogul who had built an empire with my own 2 hands, had been their perfect target. I was wealthy. I was isolated. I had been alone at the top of my company, with no family close by to notice my deterioration. I sent my first message to Tanya. Victor, trying TO, kill me. Poison in medications. Help. Her response came within minutes. I know. Found toxins in blood work. What do you need? I typed with my eyes. Contact my lawyer. Mr. Finch. Corporate law. Seattle. Tell him I'm awake. I'm conscious. Tell him I need to speak to police. Tanya's response. I'll do it tonight. Stay strong. The next challenge was the most critical. I needed to stay alive long enough for help to arrive. Victor was escalating. During his evening visit, I overheard him on his phone outside my room, speaking to the corrupt doctor. She's too stable. The current dosage isn't working. The insurance company is getting impatient. We need to trigger a cardiac event within the next 48 hours. Make it look like sepsis. Make it look sudden. 48 hours. That was all the time I had. I sent Tanya an urgent message. They're increasing poison tomorrow. Help me. Need to survive 48 hours. Tanya's response came immediately. I'm calling MR. Finch right now. He's on his way. But wait. How did Tanya know how to reach Mr. Finch? I hadn't given her his phone number. I sent back. How do you have Finch's number? Tanya's response explained everything. I'm a forensic nursing specialist. I work with police on trauma cases. Mr. Finch is my cousin. I called him directly. He's bringing state police and FBI. They're coordinating with hospital security. You're not alone anymore. Relief flooded through me. Tanya wasn't just a compassionate nurse. She was trained in recognizing medical abuse and trauma. She knew people. She had resources. I wasn't going to die in this hospital bed. What happened next required extraordinary coordination. Tanya, working with hospital security and the state police, developed a plan to protect me while gathering evidence. First, she alerted the attending physician, Dr. Michael Chin, a thorough and ethical doctor who had been suspicious of Victor's behavior from the beginning. Together, they reviewed my medical file and discovered the discrepancies. The medications that didn't match my condition, the blood work that showed toxins, the correlation between Victor's visits and my deterioration. Dr. Chin, furious at the attempt to use his hospital as a murder weapon, immediately began replacing the poison medications with saline and harmless compounds. Victor and Aurora would believe I was being dosed with neurotoxins, while I was actually receiving treatments designed to help me recover. Second, Tanya and hospital security placed a small, high-definition recording device in my room, disguised as a wall-mounted blood pressure monitor that would capture audio of everything Victor and Aurora said. Third, Mr. Finch, my actual legitimate corporate attorney, whom I had rehired through Tanya immediately after contacting him, worked with the FBI to obtain a warrant for Victor's financial records, his phone records, and his communications with Aurora. What they discovered was devastating. Victor and Aurora had been planning this murder for over a year. They had documented everything. Emails discussing the pier landing development, financial projections showing the $50 million profit, text messages explicitly discussing the poisoning plan. Aurora had sent Victor a message 3 months ago. Once Juliet's gone, we'll have $15 million from insurance, plus access to her business assets. We can flip the pier deal for $50 million in 6 months. Total take, $65 million. We disappear to the Caribbean. Victor had responded. The paralytic cocktail is untraceable. The doctor is paid off. The insurance company won't ask questions. By this time next year, we'll be unreachable. They had been so confident in their plan that they had left an electronic trail a forensic analyst could follow in her sleep. The arrest happened exactly 48 hours after I sent Tanya my first desperate message. I was awake, truly awake, and fully conscious by that point, thanks to Dr. Chen's intervention. When the FBI agents walked into my hospital room, Victor and Aurora were in the waiting room when federal agents placed them under arrest. The recorded evidence of their confessions was devastating. The financial records were irrefutable. The medical evidence, the toxins in my system, the deliberate medication swaps, the corrupt doctor's involvement, was everything prosecutors needed. My recovery took 8 weeks. The paralytic drugs slowly left my system. My muscles, which had been immobilized for nearly 2 weeks, required physical therapy to regain function. My brain, still processing the trauma of being locked inside my own body, required psychological support. But I recovered. And when I was strong enough, I returned to Sterling Acquisitions to find my company exactly as I had left it, secure, operational, and waiting for me. Victor had never gained control of the company itself. His focus had been entirely on the life insurance payout and the pier landing development. He had never acquired the deep knowledge of my business that he would have needed to actually operate it. He had been so obsessed with killing me that he had overlooked the reality that my death wouldn't actually give him the company he thought it would. At Victor's trial, the prosecutor presented the evidence methodically. The toxins, the medical records, the recorded confessions, the financial documents, the history of his previous wives' deaths. The defense was hopeless. Victor and Aurora were convicted of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and securities fraud related to the pier landing development scheme. Victor received 30 years. Aurora received 25 years. The corrupt doctor received a separate sentence of 15 years and permanent loss of his medical license. And the $15 million life insurance policy, which had briefly been in the process of being paid to Victor, was instead directed to me as restitution for the damages I had suffered. I sat in my office at Sterling Acquisitions 6 months after my recovery. The office was the same, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle, the modern furniture, the views of the city I had worked so hard to build my reputation in. But I was different. I had learned what it meant to be completely helpless, to be trapped inside your own body while people discussed your death like a financial transaction, to feel every molecule of terror while being unable to move, unable to scream, unable to run. But I had also learned what it meant to survive, to fight back using intelligence instead of strength, to trust a stranger, Tanya, who had believed in me when I had no way to prove I was conscious and aware. I had learned that monsters can wear human faces, that charm can mask cruelty, that the people we trust most can be the most dangerous. And I had learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. Tanya came to work as my chief of security and corporate compliance officer. It was the least I could do for the woman who had saved my life. Mr. Finch returned as my primary legal counsel with a substantially increased retainer and a seat on my board of directors. And I made one more decision. I established the Sterling Foundation for Domestic Violence and Medical Abuse Prevention. Using a portion of my restitution settlement, I created a fund to support survivors of spousal abuse, especially cases involving medical manipulation and poisoning. I wanted other women to have what I had. Someone who believed them. Someone who fought for them. Someone like Tanya. A year after my recovery, I closed the Pier Landing development deal, but not for $50 million. That land had become toxic, literally and figuratively, associated with a criminal conspiracy and attempted murder. Instead, I sold the development rights to a legitimate development company. The proceeds, $25 million, were donated entirely to my foundation. I didn't need the money. I had everything I needed. My company, my health, my life back. What I needed was purpose. I stood in my office on the anniversary of my recovery and looked out at the city. The woman who had been locked inside her own body, listening to her own murder being planned, was gone. In her place was someone transformed, stronger, clearer, completely unwilling to ever again allow someone else to control her life, her health, or her future. The memory of that hospital bed, the beeping monitor, Victor's whispered cruelty, the paralysis, would never fully leave me. But neither would the memory of Tanya's kindness, of Mr. Finch's unwavering support, of Dr. Chen's ethical courage. I had been tested by darkness and had found light, and I had never been more grateful to be alive. If you've made it this far, you understand. Respect is non-negotiable. My worth wasn't defined by Victor's cruel whispers or the silence of my hospital room. My story proves that feigned silence can be a weapon, and patience, the patience to survive a poison and capture the zoning maps, can be absolute power. If this resonated with you, if a person you trusted tried to frame you into invisibility for their profit, tell yourself this: your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. Never let a predator assume your stillness means helplessness. The revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. They plan my funeral to steal my company. I plan their arrest to save it. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.